800-749-5590. That's 800-749-5590. 800-749-5590.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. Democratic Minnesota Congressman Tom Emmer and Democratic Illinois Representative Mike Quigley want to honor the NHL's first black player with the Congressional Gold Medal. Willie O'Ree broke the NHL's color barrier in 1958, playing with the Boston Bruins. He was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2018. It takes 290 or two-thirds of the House to officially bestow a figure with the Congressional Gold Medal. Lawmakers first introduced O'Ree's resolution in 2019. It's now reached that two-thirds threshold and awaits a House vote. O'Ree endured bigotry, prejudice, and racism from players, fans, officials, and coaches in both the NHL and minor leagues. He later became the NHL's diversity ambassador. The Bruins just retired O'Ree's number 22 in recent days, the 12th number retired by the club. O'Ree played in 45 games for Boston between 1958 and 1961 before being traded to Montreal. He scored 4 goals and had 10 assists. With the Speaker's Lobby, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Watching and waiting. I'm Paul Stevens, Fox News. Tensions are still high between Russia and Ukraine as Russian President Vladimir Putin weighs whether he wants to launch an invasion.
The U.S. is ramping up military aid to Ukraine, and it might be just in time. The shipment arriving tonight in Kiev is the second installment of a new $200 million weapon allotment from the States. An earlier delivery packed a punch, mostly ammunition for Ukrainian soldiers fighting Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. The word from neighboring Belarus. Big new movements tonight of Russian troops and hardware. Record numbers, it's called. The total strength of Russian forces encircling Ukraine now is said to be well over 125,000. Some are just about 30 miles from the border.
Fox's Greg Palcott. The search continues for a suspect who allegedly shot and killed a Texas deputy early Sunday morning. 47-year-old Corporal Charles Galloway was shot and killed during a traffic stop just before 1 a.m. local time in the southwest Houston residential neighborhood. The gunman drove off and is still being sought. Some cruise ship passengers on Crystal Cruises' Crystal Symphony got an unexpected extra day on board.
The Crystal Symphony diverted from Miami to Bimini in the Bahamas on Saturday to avoid an arrest warrant for an unpaid fuel bill. The ship was scheduled to end a round-trip cruise out of Miami, which began January 8th. Now it appears the ship is docked in Bimini while passengers were ferried to Fort Lauderdale. Peninsula Petroleum Far East is looking to recover more than $4.6 million from Crystal Cruises, more than $1.2 million from the Crystal Symphony vessel alone. Crystal Cruises suspended sailing earlier in the week after the collapse of its parent company in Hong Kong. Ann Carrick, Fox News.
NFL playoffs on Sunday. The LA Rams edge Tampa Bay, and in overtime, the Chiefs outduel the Buffalo Bills. America is listening to Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglonia from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
The United Arab Emirates has intercepted 2 ballistic missiles targeting Abu Dhabi. The state-run news agency saying missile fragments fell harmlessly over Abu Dhabi as videos posted to social media showed the sky light up before dawn with points of light looking like interceptor missiles. There's been no immediate claim of responsibility. Austria is getting tougher on COVID-19 regulations.
In a first for Europe, Austria is preparing to roll out mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations for adults. The government in Vienna says the move is urgently needed. An opposition far-right party condemned it as a blow to freedoms. Around 3/4 of Austria's population is already fully vaccinated, but officials say that number needs to rise further if the country is to avoid future lockdowns. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
There's a new docuseries putting the spotlight on women in the National Football League.
Peacock subscribers will get their first look at some of the trailblazing women taking over the game of football.
Women have been hearing they're not qualified since the beginning of time. Watch us.
Earning It, a 5-part docuseries from NFL Films, releases its first episode today on the streaming service, offering firsthand accounts of the impact that women are having on football through the game's most prominent owners, coaches, players, and reporters. Earning It is executive produced by Jane Skinner Goodell, the wife of NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, and narrated by Grammy winner Sierra, the wife of Seattle Seahawks QB Russell Wilson. A new episode will be released weekly on Peacock, with episodes airing on NBC starting next week. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
The porn star who catapulted Michael Avenatti to fame 4 years ago gets her next role in a New York courtroom. That's when prosecutors will try and prove that Avenatti cheated her out of $300,000 in book proceeds. Stormy Daniels is the key witness in a Manhattan federal court at Avenatti's third criminal trial in the past 2 years. Opening statements are set for Monday. I'm Paul Stevens, and this is Fox News.
Here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. More services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East-West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I can't tell you how glad I am to be back here in front of this microphone again on a Monday. 5 whole days of Tall Tales ahead of me. The best engineer in the business in the control room here. Jose is our producer. He's back. Let's give him a big hand. There you go, Jose. The fans are glad you're back, and so am I. All due respect to Daryl. Daryl jumped in and filled the gap. But Daryl is not Jose. Probably never will be Jose.
We don't even spell our names the same.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. Let's start out with Zemi Ikotny. Now, you know, Zemi Ikotny is my backwards bilingual play on words. Literally translated, Zemi Ikotny means press the meat. I turn it around to Meet the Press, and I'm actually doing it to nag Chuck Todd, who has a show called Meet the Press also that's just a mere shadow of this one. And I've suspected that he's been tuning in to pick up show tips from Tall Tales. Well, I think he's finally gotten the point. This is what ran this morning on the internet. NBC News anchor warns Democrats face shellacking in 2022 midterm elections. Admits Biden has lost his identity. I've been saying stuff like this from the get-go, Jose. NBC News anchor Chuck Todd warned Sunday that Democrats could face a shellacking. Reacting to grim NBC News surveys, the Meet the Press host admitted that President Joe Biden's perception is quickly sinking and warned that Democrats could lose big time in the 2022 midterm elections. According to Todd, Biden needs a, quote, reset because he has lost his identity. I don't think he ever had an identity. He's just a serial plagiarizer. Whatever identity he had, he just copied from somebody else. He's no longer seen as competent and effective, no longer seen as a good commander-in-chief, or perhaps most damaging, as easygoing and likable. After that rant in Atlanta the other day, I'm not surprised. In fact, just 5% of adults say Mr. Biden has performed better than expected as president, one of the many lowest firsts and fewest in our poll. Todd then turned Biden's job approval as indicated by the poll, which stands at 43%. If you look at history, history shows that the kind of presidential approval rating leads to a shellacking for the party in power, Todd observed. But even worse, the poll indicated that 72% of Americans believe the country is headed in the wrong direction. Todd explained that metric spells even more bad news for Democrats if they hope to maintain control of Congress in November. Right now, our wrong track, nation's on wrong track number, sitting at 72%, second poll in a row where we've been over 70%. This is only the third time in our poll's history of over 30 years where we've had two tracks that off. Todd explained, that would again put you in shellacking territory for the party in power. And the one positive metric for the poll for Democrats is not actually positive, Todd observed. The one place Democrats are holding up okay is on the question of which party should control Congress. Basically a dead heat. 1 point advantage there, Todd said. But most analysts will tell you Democrats have to be up about 4 or 5 due to redistricting in order to actually hold the House here. So that puts it in the middle. But as you can see, 2 of our 3 most important indices are sitting in shellacking territory right now for Democrats. This is a dangerous place for the party and the president to be in the 1-year mark of the presidency. The NBC News survey was not the only poll unfavorable to Biden. A new Fox News survey found that 6 in 10 voters would back someone other than Biden if the 2024 presidential election were held today. That poll also found that Biden's approval is underwater. Well, congratulations, Chuck Todd. You finally stopped drinking the Kool-Aid and decided to be a commentator instead of a flack for the Democrats. All right, so much for Chuck Todd. Let's go to the Daily News. Once again, I guess it was a long weekend. Not much activity in the Daily News editorial boardroom. The Leon Guerrero administration, when releasing a new study from the local Department of Labor, focused on a 3.3% percentage point reduction in the island's unemployment rate from June report. The total number of unemployed people in September 2021 was 5,660, or 8.1%, a substantial decrease from the pandemic-urged high of 19.4 in December 2020, Adelup touted in a statement. But another statistic that included the quarterly analysis shows a perennial problem that hampers our island's economy: the number of people who simply do not want a job. They want to go to work for the government. Why would they want a job? Unemployed, for the purposes of this government report, covers only those who are without a job and actively seeking employment. Those not looking for work but old enough to do so are classified as not in the labor force. In September 2021, 49% of the island's residents 16 years of age and older were not employed by choice. Of the 54,190 people not in the labor force, 93% answered they did not want a job when surveyed. Just under 3,800 people wanted a job but weren't looking for work. While most didn't provide a reason why this was the case, a common response included family responsibility. That's 1,260 folks. Believe no job available. That's 550. Cannot find work. 950. School attendance. 630. Don't like to work. 2,000. Yeah. The last time 70% of the people who could work on Guam were actually working was in June of 1992, according to data GDOL maintains. That's 30 years without strong workforce, let alone an improvement on the 3 decades-old benchmark. While the years-long pandemic made it hard to see proverbial silver linings in ever-gray sky, there are several indicators that now is a good time for elected leaders to lean into business creation. Yeah, elected leaders to lean into business creation. Yeah. As they say, give me a break. First, programs already exist that incentivize new industries, including green economy careers. For example, people not interested in 9-to-5 jobs can easily pair approved tax breaks with the G3 makerspace in Chamorro Village and start their own local manufacturing businesses. Yeah, they could make automobiles, household. No, they can't. With more federal pandemic bailout funds available to spend, a local budget cycle beginning, we hope more financial focus can be paid to initiatives already progressing to allow successful ones to support more entrepreneurs and startup businesses. Second, some companies are generating enough money to hire more people, with several job fairs announced within the last 6 months. While it is certainly encouraging to see companies building back their rosters to pre-pandemic levels, it's also clear that others could use economic help to stay open. Fortunately, the U.S. Department of the Treasury has given the governor and senators a gift in the form of official guidance on how to use American Rescue Plan subsidies to fund tax decreases. Final rules on spending this money say it cannot be used to directly or indirectly offset a reduction in net tax revenue resulting from a change in law, regulation, or administrative interpretation. As long as there is not net loss of revenue resulting from a tax decrease enacted into law, ARP funds can be used to fund government operations. If a state or territory cut taxes during this period, it must demonstrate how it paid for the tax cuts from sources other than ARP funds, such as by enacting policies to raise other sources of revenue, by cutting spending, or through higher revenue due to economic growth. Meeting or exceeding prior year revenue, which the government of Guam has been doing as of late, would demonstrate it was good policy for overall net economic growth. Funding tax breaks, if feasible, would go a long way to allowing more businesses to hire workers or even afford more competitive and attractive salaries. More can be done to help get 54,000 more people to contribute to our island economy, and Congress has given enough money, billions of dollars, in order for our territory to do more. For the businesses that could use tens of thousands of local customers to help offset a still depressed tourist industry, For families that are eventually going to run out of federal unemployment, rent, and utility aid, we hope our elected leaders act to build confidence in our local job market, because 54,000 people just aren't convinced it's worth it to work. That needs to change. Well, maybe if we stop giving people money for not working, maybe it would change. I don't know. Then we have the Post. Highway projects this year will make Guam roads safer. I don't know. Guam has too many traffic accidents that result in serious injuries and death. While we can't stop all crashes, the government of Guam must continuously strive that those caused by poor road conditions are minimized. The start of 5 major road renovations projects this year is a good step in that direction. Last year, government officials broke ground on a $6.5 million reconstruction project for Route 28, better known as Isangsong Road, which is scheduled to take 10 months to complete. It's near the resurfacing project on Route 1, which began in June of 2021. Resurfacing project on Route 1, which began in June of 2021? I must have missed that one. Department of Public Works Director Vince Areola spoke last month at the Chamber 2022 Economic Forecast meeting about other upcoming projects. Route 5 between Route 2A and Naval Magazine in Santa Rita. Route 14 from the ITC intersection through the traffic circle down the Hilton Guam Resort and Spa. Route 10 from the Tri-intersection in Barrigada through Manilo. And here's one that I think is good. Epow Road from the Hilton to the entrance of the Seventh-day Adventist Clinic. That's a really dangerous little road. Areola said most of the projects were overdue and will span months. Better late than never. Too many of Guam's roads are rife with potholes, even uneven asphalt, faded road markings, and other problems. These faults damage vehicles and can result in accidents. I drove around the island Saturday night, and if you're out driving at night, it is really something, because the roads are not marked at all. Not marked at all, with one notable exception. I should have put this on the card. Inarajan. I was tempted to move to Inarajan after driving through Inarajan compared to the junkie village that I live in. Inarajan, the roads are marked. They have painted the utility poles yellow up to about 6 feet above the ground, so really easy to see them. For those people who'd like to get in races with utility poles. There are signs on many of the poles, keep Inarajan beautiful, don't litter. And the shoulders are as nice as the lawns where I live. They're nicely mowed and kept up. If you drive through Jigo, it looks like we're running a reforestation project on the shoulders of the roads. You know, we've got weeds growing along Marine Corps Drive between Dedido and Jigo that are taller than I am. Yeah, so congratulations, Inarajan. Anyhow, the rest of this article just talks about, it's actually a news story masquerading as an editorial, telling about what's coming up. It's good. In a small island like this, we should have the best highway system in the world, but I think we've got as bad a highway system as you'll find anywhere under the American flag, at least any place that I've been under the American flag, and I've been everywhere that the flag flies. I've been to the Virgin Islands, to Puerto Rico, Okinawa before reversion, you name it, and I don't think anybody beats us on bad roads. I've got another editorial here, this time from Troy. Yeah. But I also have someone who wants to get out of the green room, and that would be
forget about our little hiccup here.
Okay.
It's another Joe on the phone.
Another Joe.
About
okay.
roads and recycling program.
Well, let's see what another Joe has on his mind. Go for it, another Joe.
Hey, Bob, you're pointing out the important issues. Looks like you said Yamatic.
Yeah.
It looks like they're fulfilling campaign promises, which you would hear for years, even before the
It's
pandemic.
actually in Alahan, another Joe. Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah.
In Alahan.
In Alahan.
And,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as far as the recycling program goes, they're literally months behind, and there's actually, I think they have that program is together with UOG and over in their office in the Chamorro Village, and everyone, I would encourage everyone to go down to Chamorro Village and ask them what the heck's going on. They're delayed. The last I heard was sometime next month that they'll have everything up and running, supposedly for, I guess, maybe a grand opening. I don't know, but literally months behind schedule. So yeah, I think everyone should pay attention and take interest because that's what they want, and see what's going on. What do you think, Club?
Okay, another Joe.
Thanks for your time.
Good talking to you. All right, Troy wrote an editorial here, and this is what Troy says. Editorial, Navy should reconsider being party to land dispute. Now, when we're talking headlines in the Daily News or the Post, the person who writes the editorial doesn't write the headline. I don't know if that's the case with Candid. Maybe Troy does the headlines too. It's not as big a shop as the Daily News or the Post, but I start right out quibbling with the headline. Navy should reconsider being party to land dispute. Now, each of those words has a meaning. The word party has a definite meaning. You don't get to be a party just because someone criticizes you. But let's get into the editorial. By now, the Navy has been put on notice that it's continuing negotiations with the governor to lease 102 acres at Fidian to GovGuam. They, too, are participating in a conspiracy to circumvent and skirt the laws of Guam. Wow. Pretty heavy duty, Troy. A conspiracy. These are laws recognized by the Navy itself in a 2002 quitclaim deed that require GovGuam essentially to return formerly condemned land and return naval property to the pre-condemnation or original landowners' estates. Well, that is if the land is declared excess. If you look at, I'm not talking about federal law or Navy regs or anything, I'm talking about the local law. And the key word in the local law is that the Navy has to declare the property excess. Otherwise, none of it happens. Does the Navy really want to entrench itself in a heated local political mess, especially at a time the military needs community support for multi-billion military buildup? When military contractors working on building Camp Bloss come across, say, an indigenous tree, all construction stops. But in the case of Fidian lands, the impact is one that affects the lives of 18 families, including their children, many of them still suffering from their displacement. It happened in 1950. Troy, you've been using the demagoguery key on your keyboard there quite a bit here in this editorial. The respect the military gives to an indigenous tree should be exceeded by its concern for 18 local families. When the military comes across an ancient burial site, all construction stops. Respect is given to the grave sites of our ancestors, which it should. But we cannot help but feel that in the case of this analogy, there are 18 living and breathing families alive today with generations of them to come. Simply put, the Navy must stop its negotiations with the governor. We assume the commander of Joint Region Marianas has advisors who are knowledgeable of ancestral land claims, instead of just listening to pencil pushers who engage members of the governor's cabinet behind closed doors while turning a blind eye to the obvious. We are actually surprised at the response to a list of questions we sent to the Navy's Public Affairs Office. They did not answer any of the questions we sent them. Instead, it was rather an insulting response that had a blanket general statement written for a child to read about how much they respect the people of Guam. They even went as far in their response by stating that they are only required to deal with the governor as the elected leader of the government. So does this mean the Navy could care less about the representation of our congressman, the Speaker of our legislature, and 18 families the governor obviously continues to ignore? Let me repeat the sentence here. They even went as far in their response as stating they're only required to deal with the governor as the elected leader of the government, which seems right to me. So does this mean the Navy could care less? Obviously it means the Navy could care less, right, about the representation of our congressmen, the Speaker of our legislature, and 18 families the governor obviously continues to ignore. A new chapter to this story started with Congressman Michael San Nicolas now advocating for the land claimants with plans to take the matter up in D.C. Let us see how Joint Region Marianas reacts after this. Well, here's one possible solution here, Troy. Let's say that the Navy says, you know, that guy Troy has got a good point. We're going to stop negotiating with the governor. Hello, Governor. You know, that talk about the lease and about that land out there at Eagle Field in your hospital, forget it. It's over. It's off. What happens then? Who gets the land? Well, the Navy gets the land, right? Well, what about the 18 families? Well, you know, they're going to have to, they've been suffering for 72 years. A little bit more, I guess, won't hurt them.
You know, they always add words to the dictionary. That one needs to be retired here on Guam. The word suffering. Suffering,
yeah.
It's just been overused.
People are suffering, yeah, really. Now, I happen to know the family of two of those claimants that were listed in that list. Yeah, I happen to know them very, very well.
Are they suffering?
Not so as you could notice it. Yeah. In fact, they didn't even know until they saw those names in the paper.
Some people don't know they're suffering until they're told they're suffering.
Exactly. And there's a lot to be gained. We'll get into this with Robert Underwood. There's a lot to be gained by telling people that they're suffering. You know, you're really suffering, and, you know, I really feel for you, and I hate to see you suffer, so I'm going to help you out. But this whole Eagle Field thing is... You almost need to have a schematic on a blackboard to trace all of the cross currents and undercurrents and false statements involved. Starting out with this proposition, the government of Guam, the Guam legislature passed a law that said lands returned by the Navy as excess returned to the government of Guam. Government of Guam must quitclaim them to the Ancestral Lands Commission. The Ancestral Lands Commission must find out who the pre-condemnation owners are and deed the land to those people. No excess land, nothing happens. Now, what we're talking about here is a lease. Now, Troy, the impact of what Troy is saying is that in order to avoid that statute, there's a conspiracy between the governor and the admiral, where the admiral says, yeah, I'll give you that land out there for Eagles Field. You can build your hospital on it. And the governor says, no, Admiral, because if you do that, then it has to go to the Ancestral Land Commission and back to 18 families. We're going to have to buy it from those 18 families. It's going to cost a fortune. It's going to take forever. We'll never get our hospital built. Don't do that. Can you figure out some other way to let us build a hospital there? Admiral says, well, instead of deeding it to you, we could lease it to you for a long term, Governor. He's whispering this in the governor's ear, you know. Nobody else in the room can hear it. And the governor says, a lease for 100 years? You know, Admiral, I think that might work. Can you do that? Yeah, I can do that. Just don't tell Troy Torres. The great conspiracy between the admiral and the governor to lease the land instead of declaring it excess. So Troy says, you got to stop negotiating with the Navy. Okay, you stop negotiating with the Navy. The Navy says, you know that 100-year lease? We're not going to do it anymore. We hadn't intended on declaring that land excess. The only reason we went along with a 100-year lease is because we see it as in our interest to have a functional, modern, up-to-date hospital on this island. We're not going to declare it excess so you can do another one of those boondoggles like you did with the land at Magahaga Highway, where now you can't widen the road because you gave away a key portion of the road. We're not going to have another northern wastewater treatment plan where you gave away the land where the treatment plant is located. We're not going to do that anymore, the Admiral was saying. So we have land, but we're not going to see you waste it and work against us with this kind of a scheme. And then Troy comes along and says he's uncovered the conspiracy. Yeah, I don't know, Troy. This needs a lot of work. I just don't see the conspiracy there. And I do see that the result you're looking for is going to wind up, you talk about a win-win situation. What you're looking for here, Troy, is a lose-lose situation. We don't get the land. The landowners don't get the land. We don't get the new hospital, etc. Troy has beat the drum many times for building a hospital over on Hospital Point, a point that I think is really well taken. I don't see any reason to build out there in Eagle Field myself. But if the hospital is built on Hospital Point, that doesn't mean that the Navy then is all of a sudden going to say, oh, yippee, we can give the land to the 18 families now. It's just not in the cards. So, interesting approach to things. And once again, it's Blue Star time. And believe it or not, Troy is going to get the Blue Star. You're probably going to want to do a screenshot of this, Troy. Frame it and hang it in your lobby. Troy gets Blue Star. And you remember, you don't have to write an editorial that I agree with to get the Blue Star. But you do have to have something to say. And you need to say it forcefully. You need to have a call. You need to lay out the facts in an understandable fashion. You need to have a call to action, etc. So what Troy wrote, unlike the two daily newspapers, is a real editorial. I don't agree with it. I don't appreciate the demagoguery. But it's a whole lot better than a blank piece of paper like the two daily papers put out today. So let's give Troy a big hand. A big hand. Congratulations, Troy. All right, let's take a short break here and we'll come back to the card.
Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and Every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Howdy, Chili's is serving y'all some Texas-sized family meal, because everything's bigger in Texas. Enjoy full racks of Chili's world-famous baby back ribs, margarita chicken, savory shrimp, beef fajita, smoked jalapeno sausages, mashed potatoes, and corn on the cob. Man, this meal's bigger than Bill's, but it ain't breaking the bank. Chili's has Texas-sized family meals for just $45 to feed your crew of 3 to 6 folks. For your youngins, just add $5 for a kid's meal. Chili's, more life and bigger meals happen here.
Do you have a car? Do you want to get rid of it? Yeah, yes. Yes, there are people. Absolutely. How did you know? Here's the deal. Take your used car to the guys over at Nissan Guam, and they're going to take a look at it. And if they love it, and they probably will because you take care of things, you could get all kinds of money on this, cash for your car. Used car values are higher than ever before. They'll take all makes and models. Doesn't need to be a Nissan or an Infiniti. They'll give you a super fast appraisal, and you say, shoot, sign the papers. Now, you can use that as down payment on a brand new Nissan if you like, or maybe you need a used car. Maybe you're sitting around going, well, I got somebody's going to come in, they're moving to Guam and whatever, and they're going to need a ride. So let's go to Nissan Guam and check out the great sale they've got. The Nissan Ninja sale is going on. So all those used cars that people are taking in, well, they refurb them, change out the oil and the belts and all of the things that need to get taken care of, and turn them practically into brand new automobiles and give you some incredible savings, up to $14,000 on the used car inventory. Go and take a look at it. NissanGuam.com.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are with today's card. I start out, as usual, with Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. Then I've got the Vigilance Committee versus the governor, Cortec versus GWA, and I wonder if Troy is going to be consistent on the Navy with respect to this spat. And we've got Underwood versus Moylan plus a $500 fine. Chucky versus Jim Crow. Chuck Schumer, I call him Chucky. And then if we have some time, we'll get into Tall Tales versus Separatists. All right, starting out with Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. You'll recall that this goes back to what color, if you're looking at your computer, what color is the food in that tray? And anybody with pretty good vision would tell you it's orange. When Paul Zerzan wrote a letter to the editor saying it's orange, the Daily News, in the person of Teresa, what's her name? Teresa Padua Howe, comes back, readers to Zerzan, leave our red rice alone. This is a classic example of the truth versus the narrative. The narrative is, this is red rice. The truth is it's orange. Which is more powerful? Obviously the narrative. If you go against the narrative and speak the truth, you'll have the Daily News all over you.
Well, Bob, I do want to compliment you on your red shirt today.
Well, today is Red Shirt Monday, and I have decided that every Monday I'm going to wear a red shirt. And here it is, my red shirt for Monday. And you'll notice I'm even wearing a tie that has some red in it. And let's see, I have this little sign here that really clearly makes the point. You'll see the word red there. The letters say R-E-D. The color of the letters is orange. So the letters themselves are the narrative. The color of the letters of truth. Number 2 is red. There's just no getting around that. I'm wearing a red shirt today. The rice that you eat at fiestas is obviously red rice, and don't even think about saying that actually it's orange if you don't want to be canceled by all your friends and run right out of the fiesta on a rail.
You know, everybody obviously knows that you would never, ever wear an orange shirt.
Absolutely not. Because of my sympathy for the Irish Republic, I would never, ever wear an orange shirt. Red shirt on Monday? Absolutely.
The red looks good on you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so let's start out here with the Vigilance Committee versus the governor. Vigilance Committee calls on officials to comply with the open government law. The Vigilance Committee, a nonprofit organization dedicated to ensuring government compliance with disclosure laws, is calling attention to government entities that it says have been non-compliant with requirements of the open government law related to their publication of meeting notices. And there's a list of 8. Visitors Bureau, Northern Soil and Water Conservation District Board, Board of Examiners for Optometry. The Board of Examiners for Optometry, I guess, couldn't see well enough to do a good agenda. Tamuning Mayor's Office, Tatua. You know, when they got burned, they've already been burned once. You'd think they'd learn that the whole Vista Del Mar project got stalled because they didn't do their meeting correctly. And now I pointed out they've done it again. And we got the Alcohol Beverage Control Board, who are not doing it right, probably sitting around saying, oh, yeah, I'll drink to that. The Solid Waste Authority, the Serve Guam Commission, Guam Interagency Coordinating Council, and Department of Parks and Rec. A January 20 letter to the Governor and Attorney General was the organization's second call for action, according to Vigilance Committee President Lee Weber. Pursuant to open government law, we demand that any public agency who has been found in violation of the law cure and correct any illegally taken action and provide the public the awareness and opportunity to comment of which it was deprived. For instance, the formal and explicit withdrawal from any commitment made, coupled with a disclosure of a subsequent meeting of why individual members of the public agency took the positions, by vote or otherwise, that they did, accompanied by the full and opportunity for informed comment by members of the public at the same meeting, notice of which is properly included on the posted agenda, Weber said. So this is what Weber's saying. The law says if you don't put out an agenda in the 2 notices that are required for every week meeting, the 1-week notice and the 48-hour notice, you have to put the agenda in those notices, and the agenda items have to be detailed enough to put the public on notice as to what's going to be discussed. And if you screw up just one of those items, everything that you do at the meeting is void. Not voidable, but void. It doesn't count. So what Weber's saying is when that happens, what you got to do is you got to renotice a meeting. You got to fess up. You got to say, we screwed up, general public. We did this. We shouldn't have done it. We're going to start all over from the get-go, and we're going to do it right. And if you want to come and watch, fine. We'll even give you an opportunity to speak. That's what you got to do to make it right. You can't just have another meeting and say, oh, oops. We screwed up at the last meeting. Let's just ratify what we did, because you can't ratify a void act. So that's basically what this is about. And it's good that we have the Vigilance Committee doing this. This whole new public agenda mechanism brought about by Public Law 36-34 has brought about a really important change to the government. Because before, you'd see a notice of an agenda a week from today, the Civil Service Commission is going to meet, and here's the agenda: old business, new business, executive session, adjournment. So you'd think, I'm really interested in Smucker Huckowitz's case, but I can't afford to go to every single meeting to figure out when it's going to be. It's not that way anymore now. You have to tell the public what it is that you're going to be discussing so people can decide, do I want to go to that or not? The second, not so obvious benefit of the statute is that you can't make it up as you go along. You can't you can't say in the session agenda, executive session, and then when you're questioned say, well, we don't plan on having an executive session, but just in case we need one. You can't do that. You have to plan your meeting out probably 9 or 10 days before the meeting comes along so you can get your notice out with the agenda. God forbid that a government agency should plan a week ahead. This would almost be seen as cruel and unusual punishment. But it ought to improve the quality of decision-making of government agencies. So congratulations, Joanne Brown. This is really good legislation. This is real legislation that addresses a problem and fixes the problem in such a manner as to not just generate headlines for the author. We'll get into that a little bit later on. Okay, then we have the governor's take. Now, this letter was sent to the governor and the attorney general. Crystal Paco San Augustine, the governor's spokeswoman, said Adelup is reviewing to determine whether they agree with the Vigilance Committee's determinations.
It's a law.
Yeah, and of course, far be it for them to do this on their own unless the Vigilance Committee pointed it out to them, right? They went for months before they paid any attention to this law at all. Quote, if any boards or commissions we oversee are non-compliant, we will work with them to ensure future compliance, she added. You got to do more than that, Crystal. The governor's office oversees 80 boards and commissions. Katlina Chatrus, spokeswoman for the Office of the Attorney General, said the OAG responded to the Vigilance Committee Thursday and had no comment on the letter. The Vigilance Committee specified violations of the open government law in their letter. Publication of agenda item details being non-existent or insufficient, information to view the broadcast of regular and special meetings, or compliance with Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements. But the most common violation for public agendas is a failure to provide sufficient detail when listing agenda items. When issued a notice of violation by our committee, a few agencies responded to the lack of sufficient detail on some of their agenda items as, quote, standard items placed on the agenda, but not discussed during the publicly held meeting. Oh, we always put this in the agenda. We don't necessarily discuss them. These instances of violations are at best anomalous and at worst misleading to the public, and they zero out your whole meeting out there, board meeting members. The group also highlighted agenda deficiencies last year. Public Law 36-34, enacted in June last year, requires that agency meetings be live broadcasted. It also mandates that meeting notices contain agenda items with enough detail to, quote, put the public on notice as to what is to be discussed. Any action taken at a meeting would be void if the agenda publication or broadcasting requirements were not met. The Vigilance Committee stated that it is aware of boards and commissions who have ratified their actions taken during board meetings in order to cure noncompliance with the law. The committee contends that the law is clear in stating that actions taken during non-compliant meetings are void and of no effect, and not just voidable. With regard to this, Paco San Augustine said that until Adelup confirms whether they agree with the notices were deficient, they will refrain from further comment. The matter's under study.
So if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it.
If Crystal Paco's not there to hear it, is there sound? No. While the Vigilance Committee listed the Tamuning Mayor's office, the Governor's office doesn't oversee that office as it falls under the Mayor's Council of Guam. I'm going to introduce a new term here, bully pulpit. Bully pulpit. The governor has the biggest bully pulpit on the island. Mayors don't fall under her jurisdiction. The CCU doesn't. The utilities don't. GURA doesn't, etc. But governor, like like Joe Biden, you are it. Joe Biden, you're the president. Governor, you're the governor. So when you see part of your administration, whether it's under your control or not being transparent, you need to speak out and say everybody in the executive branch needs to obey this law, whether they're under my office or not. It's called the bully pulpit. Angel Sablon, the executive director for the MCOG, was not sent the Vigilance Committee's letter, but the Post did share it with him to get a comment from the council. The MCOG has been compliant with the updated requirements of the open government law, according to Saplan, except when I go to testify at the sentencing of a village mayor for criminal conduct. Then we don't pay any attention to the law, and we do it all the time. It's part of our mission. Individual mayor's office have been notified and advised of the law. We do not conduct their meetings, so the onus of the compliance is on the individual mayor's office. We will once again remind all offices of Public Law 36-34 be added. Well, let's give the Vigilance Committee a big hand, Jose. They're doing some really worthwhile work. I think we're really late on our break, so let's take a short break.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Okay, here we go. Next item on the card is Cortec versus GMA. Let's go back to Troy again. Troy is the first guy that really put this case up on the skyline, and it's an extremely important case. Everybody else missed it, didn't pay enough attention to it. Finally, the Daily News, after all this time, has finally decided to write it up. But Troy beat them to the punch by months. And I'd have to say that I was right along with Troy. I did the research, I read the cases, etc., and I know what's going on. It's a complicated case, but it's an extremely serious matter. Here's what the Daily News said. Land dispute could increase cost of water. The land used for the island's largest public wastewater treatment plant might be at least partly owned by construction company Cortec International, according to an ongoing civil case in the Superior Court. If Guam Water Works loses the case, which is related to ancestor land in Dededo acquired by Cortec, the water agency and its customers could pay Cortex hundreds of millions of dollars for the property, possibly causing water and sewer rates to increase, according to the water agency. Hundreds of $1 million, possibly? I think there's a good shot at that. The case started in December 2018, when government of Guam and the Department of Land Management sued Cortec, asking the Superior Court to allow land management to cancel and change the certificates of title for the Dededo property. Not quite right. You don't ask for permission. You ask the court to cancel the certificates of title. I'm going to talk a lot about certificates of title, why I think it's time that we got out of that business. According to the petition, a deputy registrar at land management, quote, erroneously created and issued certificates of title for the property in 2010, which failed to note that GWA loans land and easements in the area of the Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant. Now, I'm going to pull out my writ of I told you so here. And I'm going to tell you that if you go back to the wars of bishop succession, back in the middle of the teens, you'll require that there was something of a fight between Michael Bora, the director of land management, and the ex officio registrar of titles, San Guahu. And it dealt with the property out in Jonia that at the time was branded as the Redemptus Mater Seminary. And I, along with several other people, said that Archbishop Apparon had alienated that property from the patrimony of the church to the neo-catechumenal way. And a certificate of title issued by the Deputy Registrar of Land Titles, a certain Andrew Santos, showed that the fee simple title was actually in the name of the Archbishop. I took issue with this because it didn't even show. There was another important paper called a Declaration of Deed Restriction, which I maintain was an actual conveyance in fee simple. The certificate of title that Santos prepared didn't show that. It was brought to his attention. He made a pen and ink correction on the certificate of title and wrote it in, and my analysis was that it went from worse to worser.
There was whiteout on
it. because he showed that the Declaration of Deed Restriction was in the name of the Archdiocese instead of that seminar corporate. And
that changes it big time.
It really does. So it was complicated. You had to understand real property law. You had to understand the mechanisms of certificates of title. You have to understand that Jackie Terlahi was the counsel for the bishop at the time. And I'm going to come back to this right after the big halftime show and tell you a little bit more about my writ of I told you so, and tell you why we need to change this whole system.
Is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Mulling all the options. I'm Paul Stevens, Fox News. President Biden is considering all options on responding if Russia invades Ukraine.
The meeting at Camp David that occurred this weekend with President Biden meeting with his Joint Chiefs and his Secretary of State and his National Security Advisor, that he was presented options to send U.S. troops to NATO allies on Russia's western flank in Eastern Europe, basically the Baltics, perhaps Romania, and 3,000 to 5,000 troops. But that could go much, much higher if Putin does invade Ukraine, and if those NATO allies feel threatened, other NATO allies may contribute, and we're told that that number could rise. And I'm also told by a senior administration official that the president has not made a final decision yet.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin. The search continues for a suspect in the shooting death early Sunday of a Texas deputy. 47-year-old Corporal Charles Galloway was shot and killed during a traffic stop just before 1 a.m. local time Sunday in the southwest Houston residential neighborhood. The gunman drove off after that attack. The debate over voting laws in the U.S. showing no signs of slowing anytime soon.
Iowa Republican Senator Joni Ernst says elections should not be federalized, as she says Democrats are trying to do.
Every state will put in place its own voting systems, their election systems. That is a state's right.
But Senator Chris Coons, a Delaware Democrat, says how that happens is concerning, with rules and restrictions that he says roll back what raises turnout.
Like ballot drop boxes, drive-through voting, 24-hour early voting.
Both senators on ABC's This Week. The first primary of the 2022 election cycle is scheduled for March 1st in Texas. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
America is listening to Fox News.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
A British astrophysicist visiting the U.S. is killed by a stray bullet.
Police here in the Atlanta area tell us the victim, Dr. Matthew Wilson, was a British national who had only been in the States for a couple of days prior to being shot and killed. The 31-year-old astrophysicist was visiting his girlfriend in Brookhaven, Georgia. It's also the place where Wilson would take his last breath. His longtime girlfriend tells the Atlanta Journal-Constitution the two were awakened by the sound of gunshots near her apartment complex early last Sunday. When she tried to see where the gunfire was coming from, she tells the AJC, Wilson sat up in bed, and within moments, the 31-year-old was hit by a stray bullet in what police describe as an act of violence.
Fox's Charles Watson, the British Foreign Office, saying it's in contact with the U.S. about the killing. Chinese authorities finally lifting a month-long lockdown of Xi'an and its 13 million residents as COVID-19 infections subside just ahead of the Winter Olympics in Beijing in less than 2 weeks. A man dubbed the Granddaddy Bandit is wanted in Texas.
The FBI in Houston searching for a man who they say tried to rob two banks in the same area on Friday. Authorities say a white male in his late 50s to early 60s first tried to rob a Chase bank. He flashed a gun and demanded cash, but the teller didn't have access to the bank's money, so he fled. His second try about 2 hours later at a Capital One bank was successful. The FBI says he got away with an undisclosed sum of money. A $5,000 reward is being offered for information leading to his arrest. Chris DeMeo, Fox News.
The actor currently playing Harry Potter on Broadway, James Snyder, has been fired from the production of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child following a complaint by a co-star about his conduct and an independent investigation of the incident. I'm Paul Stevens, and this is Fox News.
Half a day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
Refresh goes on at Subway. You've tried the Cali Fresh steak. Now you can enjoy the Cali Fresh turkey. One of only 2 Cali Fresh subs. The Cali Fresh turkey is packed with deli-thin, oven-roasted turkey piled high on a bed of hickory smoked bacon, smashed avocado, and fresh mozzarella. Crafted for premium freshness, the Cali Fresh turkey is made on freshly baked, hearty, multi-grain bread with your choice of fresh veggies hand-sliced daily in restaurants. Treat yourself to a Cali Fresh turkey today. Subway. Eat fresh.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Okay, so here we are, another big halftime show on Tall Tales. We are now in the second half of Tall Tales. We got almost an hour to finish up here on a Monday, my favorite day of the week. We got a whole week of Tall Tales ahead of us. Couldn't be better. So I was talking about an autobiographical experience, the battle of the certificate of title for the Redemptus Water Seminary during the Wars of Bishop Succession. And if you remembered, if you followed it along, I alleged at least misfeasance on the part of the Deputy Registrar of Titles, Andrew Santos, the Director of Land Management, Michael Bora, the Attorney General, Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, Attorney Jackie Terlahi, etc., and the whole thing got very, very messy. And if you're interested in the details, go to Jungle Watch. And there's I think a 10-episode workup there called The Certificate of Title Fiasco.
It was a shell game.
It was a shell game. It really was. And the final denouement was this. I sued Michael Bora for failure to comply with the open government law and won. It cost him $1,000. Michael Burns became the Archbishop, fired the directors of the Redemptus Mater Seminary, replaced them with people who had the church in mind, who conveyed the seminary back to the church, back to the diocese. So the story had a happy ending, not because of the certificate of title fiasco. If anything, perhaps what I did was hold the ground and direct a lot of attention to what was going on there. And a couple of times, talk show hosts on other programs said, well, you know, why is this so important, Bob? Is it just this one matter with the church? And my response was no. The way this matter turns out affects every single land title on the island, because if you can't trust the Department of Land Management to manage its land title records, the whole system falls apart rather quickly. We're watching it fall apart right now. That's why I'm saying I'm going to file my writ of I told you so and ask that my petition for cert be granted, because I told you this way back in the middle of the middle of the teens, and now it's happening. So I'm going to go on with the rest of this story, and then I'll tell you what I think must be done. Going back into the story, according to the petition that Michael Bora filed with the court to cancel the certificate of title in Cortex's behalf, according to the petition, a deputy registrar at Land Management erroneously created and issued certificates of title for the property in 2010, which failed to note that GWA owns land and easements in the area for the Northern District Wastewater Treatment Plant. The plant, which was jointly funded by the local and federal governments, was completed in 1979. It treats and disposes of wastewater for the island's northern villages and Anderson Air Force Base. I remember when it was built, we used to run out that way, and we watched the construction of it. Cortex claimed to own about 15,000 square feet of GWA property, including land that will be used by GWA to expand the wastewater treatment plant, GovGuam's petition states. Cortex countersued in January, claiming GovGuam and GWA illegally condemned the land without paying for it and are encroaching on Cortex property. Not exactly illegally condemn the land. This is the term that you want to add to your vocabulary. Inverse condemnation. Inverse condemnation. Now, when the government of Guam or the U.S. government condemns land, that is, takes it by eminent domain, what happens is a complaint is filed with the court, a declaration of taking is filed with the court, the land then becomes the government. The matter of how much just compensation is wrestled with, and that's the way the case goes. Now, if the government takes the land without filing those papers in court, but takes control, takes possession of the land and use of the land, then a suit for inverse condemnation will lie with the owner of the land that was inversely condemned. And that's what's happened here. Cortex filed a claim in inverse condemnation against the waterworks. Cortec in November 2021 scored a victory in Superior Court after Judge Elise Iriarte ruled Cortec's claim against the government will not be dismissed because Cortec holds an ownership in the property and is standing to bring its claim. GWA, which joined the lawsuit in 2019, described Cortec as an opportunistic third party and said it plans to appeal Iriarte's decision to the Supreme Court. By wrongly recognizing that Cortec has an ownership in the Northern District wastewater treatment plant property and may bring an inverse condemnation claim for hundreds of millions of dollars, the court has not only misapplied the relevant law, but undone decades of planning by the Guam legislature, the government of Guam, the Ancestral Lands Commission, and GWA to ensure that the Northern District wastewater treatment plant property remained with and was developed by Gov Guam. GWA stated in a motion filed on January 14th. It asked Iriarte to pause the case so her ruling can be appealed. Now, here's something, again, that's unusual. Ordinarily, no appeal until there's a final judgment or a final order. There is such a thing as an interlocutory appeal, which apparently GWA is trying to perfect. They asked Iriarte to stay proceedings in her case pending the resolution of that appeal. The waterworks goes on to say, this concocted enormous potential windfall in favor of a private and non-ancestral landowner at government expense and corresponding financial cloud have an immediate impact on GWA's operations and obligations to stakeholders, including ratepayers, the military, federal authorities, and Gov Guam. Hotly contested litigation. The federal government in 1980 gave Gov Guam a lease to maintain and operate the wastewater treatment plant, which was built on 13 acres of military land within the 862-acre Air Force Communications Annex. Now, let me read that again. The federal government in 1980 gave Gov Guam a lease to maintain and operate the wastewater treatment plant. Troy Torres really took objection to this lease. They should have given the land back to the pre-condemnation owners, right? What is this lease stuff, right? In 1994, a federal law required the federal government to return 3,213 acres of excess Air Force, Navy, and Federal Aviation Administration land to Gov Guam, including the Air Force Communications Annex. Guam law states the local government must give excess federal land back to its original ancestral owners or their descendants through the Ancestral Lands Commission. And the commission in 2006 returned 257 acres of former Air Force land to the estate of Jose Martinez Torres. You never told us about that, Jose.
If it wasn't for that other last name.
Yeah, darn Torres. Including part of the Air Force Communication Annex. The Torres estate in September 2007 sold 252 acres of its ancestral land to Kil Yu Yoon for $21.4 million, court documents state. And this is something I touched on the other day. This is really something. The suffering of the people is somewhat abated by the $21 million windfall. Yoon in 2008 subdivided the property into 8 smaller lots, and in January 2010 deeded the property to his company, Unex Enterprises Corporation. According to Gov Guam, GWA owns 2 of those lots and part of a 3rd lot. Cortec acquired the property in May 2015 for $178.1 million after Unex defaulted on its mortgage with Cortec. Land Management in 2010 issued flawed certificates of title for those 8 laws, according to Gov Guam's petition. It's not Gov Guam's, it's Waterworks' petition. They failed to show easements, rights of way, and other restrictions. According to the petition, the following information was not included in the certificates. The federal government's 1980 lease to the government states that property must be used solely to build and maintain a wastewater treatment plant. When the federal government deeded the Air Force Communication Annex to GovGuam in 2002, the deed reserved all existing easements and restrictions on the property. The wastewater plant owned and operated by GWA is present on one of the lots. The 1994 law, Guam law states federal excess land returned to GovGuam shall not be returned to its ancestral owners if it is being used for government utilities, infrastructure, and public benefit. When GovGuam deeded the Air Force Communications Annex property to Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, it excluded the area for the wastewater plant. Several pre-existing easements and roadways are present on the property. Now that's where you get into the doctrine of merger by deed, which I'm not going to go into again, but simply put, if there is an easement across Blackacre that accrues to the benefit of the owner of Whiteacre, and the owner of Whiteacre acquires Blackacre, the easement is extinguished pursuant to the doctrine of merger by deed. Judge Iriarte, in a November ruling, said Cortec holds an ownership interest in the property because of Unix's defaulted mortgage, which resulted in a property sale and a mortgage deed issued to Cortec. She said the federal government's 1980 lease no longer gives GWA any rights to the property because that lease was extinguished when the federal government in 2002 conveyed all right, title, and interest of the property to GovGuam. That's the merger by deed dimension. A water line easement is the only property clearly owned by GWA, the judge decided. Cortec is not seeking the return of any land. It is solely seeking a huge windfall of public funds from a government agency, GWA stated, in its request to pause the case. The court has recognized that a private owner has the ability to purchase land that for decades has been used for public utilities pursuant to clear recorded instruments and then seek hundreds of millions of dollars in inverse condemnation against the government of Guam. That's the story. So, yeah, it's like a 30-page decision, and it's not for the faint at heart. It's complicated reading even for lawyers, but I come away with the idea that Judge Iriarte followed the law when she issued that decision, and that the waterworks is in a heap of trouble because of this. Also, I want to talk about certificates of title and why we must do away with that entire mechanism. Now, everybody out there saying, well, you can't do that. How do you know who owns the land if you don't have a certificate of title? And here's everything you wanted to know about certificates of title but didn't know who to ask. The certificate of title mechanism is part of a system known as Torrens system, Torrens. Mr. Torrens was an Australian, and he came up with a system back before the turn of the last century, back in the days before we had computers. Probably weren't even using typewriters very much. So the certificate of title, that piece of paper, was not just evidence of the title, of the fee simple title to real property. It was the fee simple title. It's kind of like a $100 bill is not just evidence of $100. It is $100. So the Torrens system developed this complicated system of bringing land within the Torrens system by what's called a land registration case. So that involves surveys, notice to adjacent owners, and a court proceeding where the judge says, yes, this particular parcel of property is now registered land, here's the number, etc., and it's okay to issue a certificate of title. The land registration people, in our case, the Department of Land Management, then will produce a certificate of title that shows who the fee simple owner is, and then there will be several blanks for the entrance of what are called memorials. So let's say that I bought Blackacre from Jose, and in the process of buying it from Jose, I had to borrow money from the Bank of Guam. So I signed a note with the Bank of Guam, signed a mortgage. The mortgage was recorded at the Department of Land Management, and the first memorial on the certificate of title would say subject to mortgage to Bank of Guam in the amount of X, etc. And then if I granted my neighbor an ingress and egress access across my property and filed the necessary papers, there would be a memorial. So everything that affects the title to that property goes into one of those memorials. The original design of the Torrens system was that as the system progressed, you'd pay for the certificate of title. You would pay the registrar for entering memorials on the certificate or for taking the memorial off or whatever. And all of this money went into a pot to ensure the accuracy of the certificate of title. So if the certificate of title turned out to be erroneous and someone were able to sue the registrar and recover, this money would be available to compensate the person who got screwed. Now, we adopted the certificate of title mechanism here way back in the Naval Administration. The first thing that the civil government did in 1950 was do away with that pot of money to pay off claimants. So we don't have that anymore. Now, the Navy really liked the Torrens system, and they took it just about every place they went. They took it to Samoa, here, etc. But it's a very flawed system because it depends on that piece of paper and those memorials in that piece of paper. So if you lose that piece of paper, that certificate of title, the way the system is designed, you can't just go down and ask, oh, I lost my paper. Can you give me another one? In order to safeguard the accuracy of certificates of title, if there is a mistake, like Andrew Santos made 2 mistakes on the property out in Jonia, you can't just correct it with pen and ink. In order to protect the sanctity of land titles, you have to go to court and petition the judge for an order changing that certificate of title. So it's not a good system. If it worked the way it's supposed to work, we wouldn't need title companies on Guam. There'd be no need for title companies except to insure unregistered land. And everyone would jump through all kinds of hoops to bring land within the Land Registration Act. Of course, the whole system here depends on Andrew Santos, the Deputy Registrar of Titles, who I don't know much about his background. I suspect he's been on the job for a long time and learned everything he knew on the job. What he did with a certificate of title for that Jonia property, it was really something. He did an abstract of title before he prepared the final certificate, and his own abstract showed the correct memorial to go on the certificate of title, which never made it to the certificate. You had Jackie Terlahi working with the Attorney General who said, well, we don't have to go to court to fix this because the property owner has surrendered the certificate of title. That's what you do when you sell the land. You turn in the certificate, and a new certificate is issued to the buyer. It's a complicated system. It's cumbersome. It's designed for the 19th century, not the 20th century. It's full of traps for the unwary. We don't need it. A forward-thinking senator ought to introduce legislation to do away with it and do away with it as soon as possible. It's not a good system. Here we go right here with this Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant. So this multi-million-dollar lawsuit turns on marks put on paper by the Deputy Registrar of Titles, Andrew Santos, who made a mistake. And we're all sitting around now wondering how this is going to come out, because if it comes out one way, we're going to be paying a lot of money for water because Cortec is going to prevail on its inverse condemnation suit and could demand that the waterworks pay rent on that real property that Cortec owns. If it turns out another way and the waterworks wins, well, okay. And then there's a third dimension here that Troy hasn't touched, and that is that when the litigation began, the United States government and the person of the United States Attorney for Guam filed a paper, a declaration of interest in the case. And the declaration of interest said something like this. By the way, guys, the U.S. government doesn't care who wins, whether it's the waterworks or Cortec. We don't care. But remember this, the conveyance to the government of Guam said that if the land is not used for a public purpose, it comes back to us like that. So that could be the safety valve that might save us all. That if Cortec wins, the feds might say, yeah, but now it's mine. Go ahead, waterworks, and go ahead with your sewer plant. But in the meantime, we probably would have wound up paying Cortec big bucks. Then, given Troy's editorial, I wonder why he hasn't asked the United States government to butt out of this controversy. You know, shouldn't Troy be saying something along the lines of that northern wastewater treatment plant should never have been leased to the government. It should have been given back to the pre-condemnation owners. And it should right now. And why does the national government want to get mixed up in this fight between Cortec and the waterworks? Maybe he'll write about that on his Candid News, which I check every morning. First thing I do in the morning, I take a look at the papers and I look at Candid News. It's a very good site.
That's quite an endorsement.
It is indeed, yeah. Well, I've given Troy, a lot of strokes. Troy is a 21st century muckraker, and he's the only one on the island. Troy is the only one that goes around looking for this stuff, and when he finds it, is not afraid to come forward and say, hey, look, this is wrong. These are powerful people, but it doesn't matter. It's the wrong thing. Okay, let's head for Wrigley Field.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Do you have a car? Do you want to get rid of it? Yeah, yes. Yes, there are people. Absolutely. How did you know? Here's the deal. Take your used car to the guys over at Nissan Guam, and they're going to take a look at it. And if they love it, and they probably will because you take care of things, you could get all kinds of money on this, cash for your car. Used car values are higher than ever before. They'll take all makes and models. Doesn't need to be a Nissan or an Infiniti. They'll give you a super fast appraisal, and you say, shoot, sign the papers. Now, you can use that as down payment on a brand new Nissan if you like, or maybe you need a used car. Maybe you're sitting around going, well, I guess somebody's going to come in, they're moving to Guam and whatever, and they're going to need a ride. So let's go to Nissan Guam and check out the great sale they've got. The Nissan Ninja sale is going on. So all those used cars that people are taking in, well, they refurb them, change out the oil and the belts and all of the things that need to get taken care of, and turn them practically into brand new automobiles and give you some incredible savings, up to $14,000 on the used car inventory. Go and take a look at it. NissanGuam.com.
Wrigley Field in Chicago, the 7th inning stretch. That means we got just 2 more innings of Tall Tales left to go today. I'll try to make the most of it, try to get up there and smack that ball right out of the park if I can. I'm going on to the next item on the card here. It's Underwood versus Moylan. And this is what Robert Underwood said on November, as you were yesterday, Friday's paper. I have heard of many political arrangements before. One of the strangest has to be Jim Moylan's statement that he will run for delegate if the incumbent delegate Michael San Nicolas decides to run for governor. Yeah. Jim, are you going to go to the prom? Yeah. Who are you going to take? Well, I'm going to ask Susie unless Mary gives me some really good signs when I ask her to go to the movies. I'd much... Yeah, I'm probably going to have to go with Susie. I'd rather go with Mary, but it just depends on how things sort out.
Hello, McFly.
Yeah. Aside from the weak-kneed nature of that statement, weak-kneed and opportunistic nature of that statement, let's explore the meaning of why and how people run for office. They normally aspire to the office and assess the obstacles. In consultation with family and a few friends, they make a determination about whether to run or not. They don't normally create obstacles in the way. In this case, Moylan created the obstacle and added the ingredient of speculation about the race for governor at the same time. He is either a weak aspirant for public office or a brilliant manipulator of the public square. Moylan is obviously an expert at grabbing attention. When you get up in the morning and decide to attack whatever decision the governor has made, some news outlet will pick it up. When you do so repeatedly, your colleagues start to wonder whether you are interested in public policy or public notice. Maybe even your own Republican colleagues will begin to doubt you. I don't know enough about the inner workings of the Republican caucus at the legislature, but Moylan served as Republican leader for only a few months in the 36th legislature before he was deposed by Senator Chris Duenas, who took over in March of 2021. Where's that dramatic music, Jose? There you go. There was some discussion about Moylan running for governor. The question is, how can he lead the island if he can't even lead the caucus? But if he casts himself as the victim of politics, even if it's his own politics, then there will be supporters who see him as heroic and a person who stands up for the people. This has worked well with other elected officials. Being a victim is another form of leadership for some people. Here's your word, Jose, I am suffering. If you can cast yourself as a victim of the MAGA Haga, it's even better. They're coming after me. Quick, surround me. Let me lay down and point out how others are attacking me. Campaigning from the fetal position may not look good to some people, but others think it's a clever way of grabbing attention and cultivating a sympathetic following. It works. San Nicolas and Moylan held a couple of orchestrated public meetings in the past. They were designed to create doubts about the MAGA Haga's handling of the American Rescue Plan. They even tried to bring the mayors on board with their efforts, but the mayors felt that they were set up for a publicity stunt. Scratch out support from the mayors. I still don't know who is running for what. Just the fact that Moylan has us speculating may be a point in his favor. He has us thinking. But I don't know why he would be running for Congress only as a condition of San Nicolas running for governor. We know how he is approaching this, but we don't know why. He hasn't articulated why he would be better representative for Guahan in Congress than others. He obviously has conceded that he would be better than anyone else except for San Nicolas. It's a strange situation. I will follow Moylan's approach. I will announce it here today. I will run for governor if the MAGA Haga decides not to run for re-election. Oops, too late. She already made the announcement. No! Well, Robert makes a good point here. I'm going to speak for myself when I go to mark my X's on the ballot and things like that. I'm looking for somebody who wants the office, not somebody who says, well, you know, I really don't want it, but so many people want me to take it that, you know, I'll just have to do it even though I don't want to do it. I'm looking for people who want the office. I'm looking for people, and I've mentioned this on the air, if you want to run for the legislature, the first thing you need to do is sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and write out one page of why you want to be a senator and what you're going to do as a senator. If you can't do that, then maybe you should run for mayor or something else, or dog catcher in Malolo. So I'm looking for people who are running for senator for a reason other than they want to be senator, other than they're looking for a $55,000 a year job with all the perks that come with it, all the junkets, etc. And if I don't see that a person fits into that category, I ain't going to vote for him. It's just that simple. Now, when a person decides to run for office, the suspicion in my mind is that he's committed to that office, not committed to getting elected to the highest office that he could swing. Yeah, I'm going to run for legislature, but if San Nicolas doesn't run for Congress, I'll run for that. And then maybe depending on who runs for, I may even run for governor. And then we need a new mayor in my village. I may run for mayor. Just whichever office I think will be the best for me, not for the people. And that's the compression that Jim Moylan is creating here. I want the highest office that I could get. I want to run for senator and I want to be minority. Well, maybe not. Yeah, so, you know, Robert really put his finger on it this time around. Of course, it's easier for a Democrat to do it or Republican, but it still counts. Now, this is not the end of it for Jim, because Jim introduced a bill. I've seen a lot of bills. I've read a lot of strange things, but I think this one takes the cake. Moylan proposes $500 fine for officials who enforce tax hikes without voter approval. Senator Jim Moylan is looking to sanction government officials who move forward with tax increases and bond borrowing that have not been approved by voters. As cited in the latest measure he introduced, it's actually Bill 240, not Bill 204, local law already mandates that tax hikes and general obligations bonds greater than $25 million must be decided by residents through a voter referendum. However, the mandate has not been truly enforced. Now, that's not quite correct. Not that it hasn't been enforced, it hasn't been complied with. Or is it is conveniently bypassed just in 2018 when the business privilege tax was increased indefinitely without voters' approval, Moylan stated in the text of his bill. The measure would provide for a $500 fine for any individual who administers or enforces either a tax hike or bond sale without voter approval. In essence, to penalize anyone breaking the law. The Republican lawmaker did not respond to questions on his measure, including upon whom the fine would be applied. Moylan, as a senator, supported bypassing voter approval for at least 2 bonds. Post files show he was among lawmakers in May of 2019 legislative session who unanimously supported a $30 million general obligation bond to build a 3rd trash cell at the Ladzone landfill. According to legislative records, in March of 21, he also helped pass a bill that refinanced hundreds of millions of dollars of business privilege tax bonds. Both measures specifically included provisions to authorize the debt issuances, quote, notwithstanding local mandates for voters to approve the proposals. Using similar language, the subsequent bonds and tax increases could be enacted without voter approval, nullifying Moylan's proposed fines, even if his latest measure becomes law. So, a little diversion here. We have a statute that says if you want to borrow money, if you want to raise taxes, you got to take it to the people in the form of a referendum. And the people who want to present themselves as intellectuals will say, one legislature can't bind another legislature, so to sound really intelligent. But actually, one legislature can't even bind itself. And I've given that example before, and I'll give it again. Legislature could pass a bill that said no new bills can be introduced on the 1st of December of any year. Come the 1st of December this year, a bill could be introduced that said all new bills must be introduced on the 1st of December. And if it passes, that's the law. It's the last expression of the sovereign will it controls. So no legislature can even bind itself unless it gets into something like a bond issue or where third-party rights are involved. So this is Moylan's bill 240. The legislature finds that the language has been in Guam statute since 1998, which requires the voter approval for any local enacted or administered tax, bonds, etc., or for the establishment of new fees. However, the mandate has not been truly enforced or is conveniently bypassed, just as in 2018, when the BPT was increased indefinitely without voter approval. The spirit of Public Law 24-222, which established the process for such voter approvals, was to provide the community with decision-making on mandates which directly impact the pocketbooks of island residents. Now, I'm going to stop here, and I'll tell you, this is how you have to do it. If you really want to do this, you got to have a constitution. And your constitution must have the language that you want. No new taxes unless approved by public referendum. If it's only a creature of statute, as I have laboriously explained, the legislature makes the laws, the legislature can change the laws. While the intent or the need of the measure may differ in terms of perspectives of the role of the legislative body, the reality is that unless the statute is repealed, it is still law. It is also another example of the series of statutes in Guam's books which are either never enforced or conveniently ignored. Since this act establishes a fine on any individual who administers a tax increase or new fee, which had not been approved through the provisions stipulated in the law. In essence, it would penalize anyone breaking the law. Further, the greater objective is to hope that this act would set the precedents, poor use of that word, moving forward with assuring enacted statutes are indeed adhered to. So this is what Jim proposes. Notwithstanding any other provision of the law, rule, or regulation to the contrary, any individual who administers or enforces a tax increase on a locally enacted or administered tax in Guam without the approval of voters through the provisions stipulated in Section 16.311 shall be subject to a fine of $500 for the violation, and these monies shall be deposited to the Better Public Service Fund, etc. So let's head for Churchill Downs, and I'll finish this up after we leave Louisville.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. More services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Okay, so here we are coming back from Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky, and I stumbled across Jim Moylan's bill. What's the number? 240 again. And so this is what Jim is proposing. We have a statute on the books that says if you're going to raise taxes in the amount of $25 million, the law is not effective until it's approved by a referendum of people. Now, in order to get around that, it's very easy to draft a statute that says that section of the law doesn't apply. So you don't have to do that in order to raise taxes or issue bonds. The easy legislative shorthand is to use the phrase notwithstanding any other law. So Jim says this is a bad practice, and he wants it to stop. So he has introduced a bill that would fine any person $500 for enforcing a tax that was not approved through the referendum process. So let's say that the legislature passes with the notwithstanding, increases the taxes, and Jim says, okay, the Director of Revenue and Taxation needs to be fined $500. How does that happen? Well, Jim calls up the Chief of Police. And the Chief of Police says, I can't help you right now, Jim. I'm working on my motorcycle, Jeep case, and Jeep throat, and several other things. But I'm not going to go out and arrest the Director of Revenue and Taxation for collecting a tax that was properly adopted by the legislature. Well, what about my $500 fine? Well, you can only fine someone for breaking the law, Jim. What law was broken? Well, they shouldn't do it that way. And then it goes nowhere. Now, Jim says any person. So if the Director of Revenue and Taxation assigns someone at the counter downstairs to collect these taxes, who is liable for the $500 fine? It's the farther you get into it, the stranger it becomes.
Is this for proposing the tax raise, passing the tax?
Collecting.
Oh, collecting it.
Yeah, I think that's what it says.
So it would be somebody from Revenue Tax paying the fine.
Any individual who administers or enforces a tax increase on locally enacted administered tax, administers or enforces. So arguably, it's probably 100 people at the Department of Rev Tax, right?
I'm thinking, what's 100 divided, or 500 divided by 100?
That's a good revenue raiser, right? Yeah. So back to the drawing board on this one, Jim. This is, this this is for Saturday Night Live, not for the Guam legislature.
Who's on first?
I don't know who's on first, but by God, he's going to get fined. Yeah, this is really something. And then Jim, of course, adds in the severability clause. If any provision of this act is found to be invalid or contrary to law, such invalidity shall not affect any other. That's probably the only part of the bill that makes any sense. It's the severability clause. So if we took that a little bit farther, then, you know, we could fine people for any time that they did something we didn't like. You know, if as an example, the chief of police, anytime the chief of police assigns a patrolman to do a patrol check of his motorcycle, he will be fined $500, right? I don't know where the Moylan think tank came up with this one, but this is nice try, Jim. Okay, and we turn to national news. We got Chucky versus Jim Crow. And this is something that ran in a National Review on January 21st. The Democrats spent the last 2 weeks holding a circus. The theme of that circus was that American elections would be illegitimate and reimpose Jim Crow 2.0 unless Congress passed a radical overhaul. There you go. Changing how elections have been held in this country since the founding. Now let's stop and talk about who is this Jim Crow anyhow. And if you look it up, there was a kind of a minstrel act projecting a stereotype of slaves back before the Civil War and putting African Americans in a really unfavorable light in the stereotype. And that was Jim Crow. And there was even a song, Jump Jim Crow, jump, jump, jump Jim Crow, take another partner and away you, and etc. So Jim Crow came to mean laws that put African Americans in an extremely bad position vis-a-vis society. A lot of folks are going to say it was a classic example of white supremacy. And since it happened back, you know, before the Civil War and after the Civil War, it still continues today, according to them. A really good example of Jim Crow laws is one that I've mentioned here on the show and actually forbidden the use of here on the show. And I'm going to go through it again. Grandfather clause. Well, yeah, you know, they changed the law, but he had his license before they changed the law, so they grandfathered him in. Now, here's the origin of grandfather clause. After the Civil War and after the passage of the 15th Amendment that said you couldn't discriminate against, you couldn't keep a person from voting because of previous condition of servitude, race, or color, the Jim Crow laws, or the black codes in the southern part of the United States, were imaginative, and they said in order to vote, you must pass a literacy test. We don't want any dumb voters. So they would have an almost impossible literacy test that any African American would have to pass in order to vote. But they also found out that this was keeping a lot of white folks from voting also. And of course, white folks would vote the right way, so we can't have that. So the workaround was this. Anybody whose grandfather voted before the Civil War would be exempt from the literacy test. You didn't have to take it. You would be grandfathered in. How many how many African Americans' grandfathers voted before the Civil War? And this is where the idea of racial discrimination by proxy comes in. That was a key feature of the Ninth Circuit's decision in the Davis case, that this, ancestral descendants is just a proxy for race, the race being Chamorro. So finally, in 1915, in Oklahoma, this this grandfather clause exemption from the literacy test was finally stricken as a proxy for race. But the term continues on. So if you're a careful speaker of the English language or any other, English tomorrow, don't use that phrase because it shows that you are careless with your imagery. Don't talk in terms of, well, yeah, but all those folks that were already licensed, we got to get a grandfather clause for them. Bad choice of words. Okay, so Jim Crow, and Chucky says that the theme of the circus was that American elections would be illegitimate and reimpose Jim Crow 2.0 unless Congress passed a radical overhaul, changing how elections have been held in this country since the founding. People who ought to know better, including President Biden and Senate Majority Leader Chucky Schumer, argued that American elections are a rigged game. I'll pick this up tomorrow, a little bit more Chucky versus Jim Crow tomorrow. We'll see you, Ben. Glad to have you back, Jose. Take a victory lap.
Good to be back. Let's go, Brandon.
There we go. Let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Tension increases. I'm Paul Stevens, Fox News. President Biden is reportedly contemplating sending U.S. troops to Eastern Europe as Russian troops remain on the border with Ukraine.
Fox News confirms President Biden is considering deploying some 5,000 troops in the Baltic states and Eastern Europe as Russian troops gather along the Ukraine border. There could be additional troops sent from NATO countries, a warning to Russia's President Vladimir Putin not to try to move into any other neighboring countries. And the U.S. State Department is also ordering the departure of non-essential personnel from the American embassy in Ukraine. The State Department is also warning U.S. citizens against travel to Russia.
Fox's Ashley Strohmeyer. 5 people have been found dead in a Milwaukee home.
Upon their arrival, entry into the residence was made, and 5 individuals were found deceased. 4 of the deceased are adult males, and 1 is an adult female. All 5 deaths are being treated as homicides.
Milwaukee Assistant Police Chief Paul Formolo. Police were called to the address for a welfare check. This as the search is on for a suspect after a Texas deputy was shot and killed early Sunday.
A manhunt is underway for the suspect in the brutal murder of 47-year-old Corporal Charles Galloway. Deputies say Galloway pulled over for a traffic stop early this morning in southwest Houston, and the driver in the other vehicle got out and fired into Galloway's patrol car multiple times, then took off. Witnesses described seeing an assault-type weapon. It's unclear why the suspect shot Galloway, but what is clear is that this is yet another deadly attack on a member of law enforcement. Corporal Galloway was a 12-and-a-half-year veteran with Harris County. He leaves behind a daughter and a sister, as well as the numerous officers he trained. His colleagues say he was loved very much by the people he served.
Fox's Christina Coleman. American